Hey, it's been a minute, and I thought I'd pop out a video because we did have something substantial happen last Friday, which was Jay Powell's speech at the Jackson Hole, Kansas City Economic Symposium. And I thought there were some really interesting things in what he said. And the reason why I wanted to pop this out to you is because too often we read headlines and too few of us go and actually dive into what Powell said and read the whole speech and read the context of what he was trying to get across. There's some really great nuggets in there talking about what Fed policy is going to be. But I want to start with inflation and looking at what Fed's perspective is on that, because that'll tell you everything you kind of need to know about where they're going to go with interest rates and why they are so reluctant to raise rates. So they do, Powell does a great job of going through past mistakes that the Federal Reserve has made back in the 70s and the 80s when they overreacted to what really were shorter term inflation pressures. And specifically in the 1970s when they were talking about food prices and energy prices. What's interesting about that time frame was that the Fed said, or Jay Powell says in his talk, that it's really important, especially I guess he was talking about the 60s first, not to overreact to short-term things that will, price increases that will eventually work their way out, which is what he's making analogous to right now, right? He's saying that this big surge in demand for durable goods is going to slow down cars and, construction of houses and things like that. They think that'll slow down as bottlenecks ease, as COVID gets better, right? In the sense of being able to get laborers in and so on. But what was interesting to me was when he was talking about the 1970s, and he said there was two things that really drove prices back then. One was energy and one was food prices. And they eventually abated, right? So they slowed down. The problem was, and this is the key thing that I just want to put out to everybody today, the biggest problem that happened in the 1970s wasn't those price rises in food and energy. It was the change in consumers' expectations about the future and future price rises. And those expectations quickly got built into higher inflation expectations got built into a lot of things like union contracts, which continue to this day. Because why? Because there's a lot of federal unions that are, pushing for new contracts, and they'll build in higher prices. There's also things like Social Security, which builds in a cost of living adjustment, and that'll be based on the last, year of price increases. So that's really where the Fed spends a lot of time, is looking at those forward-looking expectations for consumers. And right now, believe it or not, they're rising. So that's not surprising. And Jay Powell in his speech goes through a bunch of these, and you can look at the charts. There's great charts that are associated with that, but they're finally rising back up to the levels where Powell and the Fed want them to be, which is at about 2%. But I just think, sometimes within these speeches, there's just such great nuggets of information, especially historical information, that they put out there. And it really gives you more of a basis to understand how they're approaching today's current problems. I will include the URL for Powell's speech. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, you can see some of the graphs that are associated with it. So I just wanted to put this out today before I hop on my boat to get it tested out. Yes, I just did buy a boat finally. Another good example of really sharp rises in durable goods. You couldn't find a boat at the beginning of the summer. Now they're starting to come online. But wow, there's so many great stories out there about supply chain problems. And I'll probably talk about those maybe later this week as I continue to dive in and do research. All right, I'm Andy Busch, future economist. You can find me at andrewbusch.com. You can get all my research there for free, so check those out, and thanks for watching.